I always feel so cool when I have to wind my watch. Sometimes I don't even have to. All right, we're gonna do it live. F- it. And what we're gonna do live today is go over the information that we've gathered from Reddit and a couple other places about our app, about our build, about our portal, about our vibe code, whatever you want to call it, thing. To do that, we're going to hop in, and I can already tell you it's going to be less than expected, unfortunately. I've had some comments and a lot less than the previous round. But the good thing is that a lot of these things are consistent. So a lot of these people, what are they saying? They're saying you have the other things like Trello, Asana, you have the verification of a real pain point, scope creep kills, etc., etc. So it sounds like we're tackling a real issue. It's just people are having different perspectives on what they're doing to get around it. Okay, so with Reddit overall, it seems like we've kind of done what we need to do to get the information. Now, with Reddit, there's so much negative feeling right now out there on Reddit, it seems like, for anything vibe coding, for anything AI related, for anything that's a GPT wrapper, which they use as like an insult, but I think it's just a fundamental technique, right? You're using this core engine and then you're designing the car around it. There's many cars out there on the road that have the same engine, but they're entirely different cars. And so I don't know why people are so against it other than just pure fear and fear mongering. But regardless, we're going to take what we can, and we got this stuff from Reddit. And if we go into our other group over here, which is called the Startup Club, here is me posting about it, and then this gentleman here says something quite similar. It's easier to use than Trello. You want to manage scope creep, very easy to get bombarded with ideas. And then here he says, what you can do is build a project plan, weight the features as core or nice to have or fun, for example, and then build from there. That's actually not bad because, you know, what I have right now is like a small, medium, and large tag in my revision portal. So like a client would go in and they would say, this is small, this is medium, and this is large. But maybe I could also implement something like a priority, which is not a bad idea. And these are actually kind of cool. Instead of saying like high, medium, and low priority, it actually does make sense to use like core, nice to have, and fun, for example. Obviously, core functionality is a must, but core functionality is in simplest form. And then once you're happy with those features, brands into Git and start the new features. Once you're happy, merge back in. However you build, you need to know at what point the feature's set. No matter how small, you're happy to ship a version. Best of luck. I like this tool. Cool. Overall, the feedback is decent. Overall, you know, this is kind of as much as we can do because we're only giving screenshots. We're not giving like the full interactive thing for people to play around with and stuff like that. It's just not built out to that level. But regardless, it sounds like we've verified the idea as an actual pain point. Now we're just trying to get into the solutions. And this is the point of the build where you're going to be tempted to start adding in cool things, right? Like that other guy said, we have the core, we have the cool, and then we have like the nice to have, the neat type stuff. And this is where it gets very tempting, especially right now in our day and age, because everyone thinks they're going to build the next AI startup that's going to blow up or something. You really have to make sure that you stay pared down to the solution, the user experience at the end of the day, okay? And something that in my past I didn't imagine would be playing a big role today is my experience in industrial design. And industrial design is kind of like this book says, the design of everyday things, meaning like physical things. Whether it's this microphone or the mouse that I use, it is the actual design of physical things, right? Sometimes it's in an engineering context, but for the most part, we're talking about consumer use cases. So it could be a pot of tea. It could be, you know, those vacuums that are like super human, the Dyson brand and stuff like that. And some of the stuff that people make really is just kind of pompous, really is just to kind of have an aesthetic. And it's cool, but you got to understand that there's that. But really, really the core of industrial design is to have usability be first and foremost, and then aesthetics. And I think that that is very important to keep in mind when it comes to designing products, digital products like we're doing now. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of the momentum right now is in building the next big thing and doing the next groundbreaking, revolutionary thing. But it's super important just to go back to the principles of what is this thing trying to accomplish for our user? Is it doing it in a clear and concise way? And is it doing it in a way where the person feels like they've won? Okay. And that last component can be called gamification or user journey or whatever you want to call it. But those are like the three big principles that we want to make sure that we're continuing to follow. So going from here, what we're going to do is add in that one feature for the priority and see if we like it. Honestly, the size and priority thing are going to be a bit of a weird discussion slash debate between me and clients. Some of them probably won't like it, some of them will like it, but really at the end of the day, it's my business. They're going to have to go in and they're going to have to kind of follow the structure so that everything is clear. I'll tell you guys from experience as well, the type of clients that like this sort of thing are going to be good clients. They're going to be professional, they're going to pay on time, and they're going to be more structured in the communication and everything else that comes with it. The type of people that balk at this sort of thing, that say this is complicated, this is whatever, are probably going to be the people that text you in the middle of the night, are probably going to be the people that are going to say, hey, one more quick thing, or something like that. And so this is a good litmus test as well, right? And to back up for a second, there's a lot of litmus tests that you can do with clients that will let you know like the type of person that they're going to be, and ultimately if it's going to be a good fit. So in sales, you call this qualification, but qualification is very important on the building side of things because a lot of people have very unrealistic expectations right now about what can be accomplished, how long it can be accomplished, and the complexity involved, okay? Bolt, Lovable, Base 44 have all done an excellent job marketing the fact that anyone can build an app nowadays, but a horrible job at marketing the fact that most of them are going to be bad when it comes to being shippable, when it comes to being actually ready for the markets, okay? So big difference in doing something in your small silo of Lovable or MVP and just having all these different products and stuff, but you haven't actually shipped the damn thing, so you don't know when it breaks and you don't know how it actually interacts with the world, okay? So when you have a client come to you and say, I want to rebuild this thing that finds customers, personalizes message to the customers, sends those messages to the customers, adds a follow-up sequence, and also, updates our website with my favorite dog every once in a while, like all these silly things. I'm being a little facetious, but there's people that want you to basically recreate HubSpot in a weekend. And I would implore you to take a step back and try to educate them. And if they don't get it, they don't get it. Don't try to build something for someone off of spec if they just do not get the fact that these things take a long time to develop, take a long time to test, take a long time to future-proof, etc., okay? Always remember that it is easier to add things on than it is to remove things, but it is more important to remove things than it is to add things on. Simplicity, less is more. The principles we all know is true applies here. And a lot of people, like I said, want to just create this all-in-one thing. And it can be done. That's the thing. It can be done to recreate a CRM, to recreate a HubSpot, to recreate your own Airtable. But the pros and the cons sometimes have to be discussed. And if you decide that there are more pros than cons, then you really have to be realistic and you really have to manage expectations about deliverables, timelines, and testing, and so on and so forth. So protect yourself by making sure that you're having those uncomfortable moments in the conversation early rather than just saying yes, and then struggle later. In business, a lot of times I would actually implore people to just kind of say yes and figure it out later. But in this case, I do want to caution you a little bit when it comes to those more complex builds, right? Be honest with yourself about where you're at and what you can do. I'm not saying only do the things that you know for a fact. There has to be a little bit of that pushing the edge thing because you're going to get motivated by the money and by closing the client. So I do actually encourage you to push your edge a little bit, but be careful. If you're not willing to stay up late, if you're not willing to really, spend your weekends on things, you might screw it up, okay? I've had situations where I, in the middle of projects, have realized, oh my God, I need to learn an entirely different tool. And I stayed awake super late and I stayed in on weekends and I, stopped doing outbound and other business processes and stuff. And I suffered in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, it did work out because I had that learning curve and I had that education, if you will. But if I could do it smarter, I think I would do it a different way. And like I said, maybe push your edge a little bit, but not so much so that you're burning yourself out or anything like that. So the next step for something like this is to, like I said, add in those little features and then really start to get it in the hands of people so they can play around with it and interact with it. Like I said, we were doing a lot of screenshots and just telling people about the idea. Now, what I want to do is actually get it into people's hands and have them use it. So what I'm going to do is basically prepare this so that when my next client comes around, I'm able to have them just input their email and be ready to go. At this point, I don't really feel like this is something that should be monetized right off the bat. I really do want some more interaction with it so that we can understand if people like it, don't like it, or where they get hung up on. Once we get this in the hands of people, what we're going to realize is the friction points. And if you don't understand friction, basically it comes down to that idea of qualification again. So this is a calendar, and my calendar is very simple. It doesn't ask for anything besides a date and a time. But there are calendars that have your phone number, your name, email address, what the meeting is about, etc., etc. And it can make these things required in order to book the call. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing because you will get a higher quality of leads, but you will also get less people going all the way through that form. So you always have to ask yourself that question of, is it worth the trade-off? Do you want to actually make it a little harder to book a call so that you'll have people that are more invested and they're more likely to say yes, or would you rather speak to more people, right? And so it's kind of a similar question when it comes to apps like this, where do you want it to be something where someone goes through and it's just like a smooth road, but maybe there's just like some junk? Or do you want it to be a little harder to put in these requests in this case, or interact in whatever case you're doing, and make it so that you have cleaner information? So what I'm going to do is make this process here a little simpler. I'm probably going to add in some kind of onboarding so that someone knows what to do, but it's not going to be too much. I don't even want to include a video, to be honest with you. I just want to make it simple, step by step. And once we add that in, it's basically going to be ready for the next phase. And that phase is going to be getting people to interact with it. Okay. So small recap. We've had the series of ideas and asked the public which one would be worth developing. We plucked out the one that makes the most sense. We got another conversation around that and asked people which competitors they use and why they use those versus this. And we realized that there is a core issue. There's just different styles on how you want to actually solve that issue. And now we've stuck to our guns and we're saying this is what we want to do and this is how we want to do it. But also we're going to implement a couple other things that we've learned from other products that makes the whole process smoother and hopefully easier and hopefully nice to interact with. And so now we're going to build that stuff into it. We're basically going to create another version, and then we're going to ship that out in a way that causes the same type of interactivity, the same type of beta feedback, but this time people are going to be able to actually touch it, play the buttons, and do the actual thing. They're not just seeing it from the outside or behind a wall of glass. They're going to be able to grab it, touch it, digitally, and then be able to give us a bit more proper feedback on like these specifics, right? This is where it goes from the more general to the specifics, like buttons and things that might be, uncovered as bugs and stuff like that. So this is the process. We go from general to specific to releasable, and then we release it, and then there's this ongoing cycle if you want to maintain the thing, okay? So that's the plan for the next week. We're going to be running through that. I'll update you guys in a bit about what's going on and how that progresses. Other than that, take care. If you want to see some more, hop into the school. Ciao.